With Pennsylvania and much of the Northeast being inundated with tremendous amounts of smoke in the atmosphere, we thought we'd take some time tonight to break things down in terms of air quality and smoke and start off with the fact that this is not normal. Here's a time lapse from yesterday. One of our graduates from the Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science here at Penn State, you might recognize the name. He was on Weather World back in 2019. Simon Wachholz captured this from 10 to 12:30 yesterday in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. The sky turning from that milky shade of white to a deepening orange, visibility greatly reduced as we went into the afternoon. And that was the case across a good portion of northeastern Pennsylvania and the New York City metro area. All week long, we've been talking about this slow-moving closed low over the northeastern U.S. and the Canadian Maritimes, spinning in some rain showers there. Meanwhile, an area of high pressure north of the Great Lakes has really created a funnel of wildfire smoke from Quebec all the way down through the Finger Lakes yesterday afternoon. This is the visible satellite, by the way, from yesterday, highlighting this big plume of smoke that really inundated eastern Pennsylvania, the Poconos, Allentown, including the New York City area, where we even saw a brief drop in temperature as that plume of smoke went through, on the order of about 3 to 5 degrees in many locations. First things first, why orange? Well, the sun emits all wavelengths of visible light, so all colors, but the smoke particles actually scatter shorter wavelengths, so the yellows, greens, blues, and violets. Meanwhile, the ones that do get through are the reds and oranges, so that's why the sky turned that shade of orange. And there were impacts. Sporting events were canceled yesterday, ground stops in major airports like LaGuardia and Newark. Even here in Pennsylvania, the Special Olympic Summer Games have been canceled in State College due to poor air quality. Visibility was less than a mile and a half in many locations through the afternoon. This was my snapshot, actually, of looking towards Mount Nittany, which is almost invisible because of the thickness of smoke that we were dealing with. When we're talking about air quality, you'll hear the term PM 2.5. So what is that? Well, we're talking about particulate matter 2.5, which refers to tiny particles or droplets in the air that are 2.5 microns or less in width. So here's your conversion of microns to 1 inch. So we're talking about particles that are about 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair, some of those even smaller than that. They come from sources like exhaust, burning of fuels, cooking, and they travel deeply into your respiratory tract. That's why there's a big concern when it comes to unhealthy air conditions and when we're talking about PM 2.5. You've heard about the AQI. What does that mean? That's the air quality index that goes from 0 to 500, and it ranks a scale of health concerns. So when we're in the green here, the 0 to 50, that's a typical day with good air quality. Sometimes in the summer months you hear about an air quality action day where we might be in this orange where it's unhealthy for sensitive groups, but all the AQIs in eastern Pennsylvania and the New York City area yesterday were in the red where we're talking about unhealthy or even up towards the hazardous level here in that maroon. Some places seeing AQIs over 300 yesterday afternoon, and that was also the case in some places this morning. If you go to airnow.gov, this is a free site, you can see up-to-minute AQI values for your particular location. I typed in Harrisburg this morning, and here's what we saw, 353, where we're in that hazardous level for all groups to be outside. The AQI can also, there's a conversion actually you can find online where if you type in an AQI value and how many hours of exposure, it actually translates it to how many cigarettes, the equivalent of what you could have smoked. And so an AQI of about 400 with 1 hour of exposure equates to almost smoking one whole cigarette. Now, this has happened before. We actually had some Canadian wildfire smoke move through Pennsylvania in September. Some reports here in area newspapers where it did change the color of the sky, and even just a brief tinge of smoke could be smelled, but nothing like yesterday. We certainly saw this being unprecedented across the Northeast yesterday. Big concentrations of hazardous air quality moving through northeast Pennsylvania and the New York City metro. In fact, it actually was the worst wildfire smoke day in recent U.S. history, at least going back to 2006. You can see other days happening in September of 2020 when we had those wildfires out west, but the concentration here in the northeastern U.S. was much higher yesterday compared to those wildfire days. It actually made New York City have the worst air quality in the world yesterday. Compare that to places like Qatar and India, and we still are seeing those high AQI values in some parts of the Northeast today. Here's just a breakdown of some of those AQI values yesterday, looking at the 10-minute averages. I wanted to hone in on Allentown specifically because by 2 o'clock yesterday, when we saw the big plume of smoke move in, an AQI of 361 was observed. That is the record high, with those records going back to the 1960s. So certainly unprecedented. Also breaking records in terms of smoke observations. Several locations, including State College, have observed smoke observations for multiple hours. In fact, we've had more smoke obs in the last 2 days in State College than the previous 43 years combined. You can see this year really sticking out like a sore thumb compared to all those smoke observations we've had in past years. So this is certainly remarkable and worth the hype. Notable nuggets. This actually shows a graduate from the department here a couple of years ago tweeted out yesterday that the monitor near Bethlehem had a rare 24-hour average hazardous AQI of over 300. He's doubtful that's ever been observed anywhere in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic U.S. The Mount Holly Weather Service office issued a special marine dense smoke advisory for the boaters to take caution. And this is what a typical New York City snapshot would look like of the skyline. This was yesterday afternoon at 2 p.m. So just a breakdown of where things stand with the Canadian wildfires. As of this morning, more than 9.4 million acres have already burned. That's more acreage than the states of Connecticut and New Jersey combined. 400 active wildfires or more continue to be blazing across Canada. Nearly 250 of them are out of control. There have been over 2,300 total so far this season. And the season is not done. It typically lasts all the way from May to September. It's worth noting that climate change didn't cause this specific situation to happen in the Northeast, but it certainly made the conditions more favorable with the extreme drought and heat that they've had in Canada this spring and as of recent. Stay with us. We're back in a moment with more.